It's Melissa Peters here with DORN Companies, coming to you pain-free live to help you live pain and injury-free. Thanks for tuning in for another episode of the Injury Prevention Academy, brought to you by DORN Companies, the country's leading wellness-based pain management and injury prevention company, committed to reducing costs of healthcare, workers' compensation, and lost productivity, resulting in over $100 million in savings over the last 20 years for our clients. Joining us today is Tim McGraw, who is the VP of Global HSE and Security at Smiths Group. Tim joined Smiths Group in May 2017. Currently, Tim oversees safety, security, and environmental affairs for Smiths Group and its 22,000 colleagues worldwide. Tim spent the previous 7 years at Smiths Medical, which is Smiths' second largest division, as VP of EHS, Security, and Facilities. Prior to that, Tim worked in HSE for 21 years for Northwest Airlines, Delta Airlines, Koch Industries, and the state of Minnesota. He joined Group HSE at Smiths to lead safety across the group with his 30-plus years of HSE experience. So, Tim, thank you so much for taking time to join me today. How you doing over there?
Thank you, Melissa. It's really good to be here. It's a pleasure to be with all. It's a little strange these days working from home. I'm in my home gym and office, so it's strange not to be traveling. It's strange to be working from home, but I guess it's what we are all doing these days, so it's working out just fine.
That's good to hear, and I have to say, as I mentioned before, I'm digging the setup. I feel like it has a good vibe for what we're trying to accomplish. So
it is our own health and wellness, yes.
Exactly. So actually today, Tim, we're going to be focusing a lot on the importance of communication in developing an impactful safety culture that strives to reduce risk, harm, and injury among your employees at Smiths, both overall and, of course, in current circumstances. So to start, could you provide an overview of the safety systems that you all follow at Smiths across the various divisions and how these systems work to promote a strong safety culture?
Yeah, I could talk for a great length about that, Melissa. I think it's built on a foundation, right? Our plants are all ISO 18001, 14001 certified, and so we have the management system foundation and a compliance focus. But beyond that, it's deep in our culture in terms of ownership and engagement and empowerment of all our colleagues and associates, where we own it on the front lines and our structure, right? So Smiths Group is a fairly large, right? We have 22,000 employees that are split among 5 divisions, and each of those divisions runs its own program that follows our general alignment. So we have an empowered structure that lets each do it their own way to manage their risks and their own geographies and their own way of doing it, while following along with the general corporate guidance.
Okay, understood. And when it comes to that empowerment, it sounds like it's really getting buy-in. How does this differ from what a typical structure or approach to HSE might look like?
Good question. I don't think there's any real magic to it. I think it's led by a very passionate CEO, and his predecessor was also very passionate. So it's a very values-driven safety organization, and I know many companies have that. So it doesn't differ, other than it is just deeply ingrained in who we are, how we work, and how we talk about our day. Right? We just naturally start with safety discussions and safety performance, and so it's deeply embedded.
Wonderful. That sounds like it is a great culture, like you would want to create among something such as safety. And I know I got a chance to review beforehand, but would like for you to speak to some of these major components. And I know you have a top 10 key factors that are related to HSE success. So do you mind walking our listeners and viewers through what those top 10 key factors are and how they help build that kind of ingrained safety culture?
Very happy to, Melissa. And I think, when I get to number 10, please embrace that one as I get through this, because I think you'll appreciate that when I get there. I already mentioned 2 of them, right? We have really strong leadership commitment. Starts at the CEO and the board level and runs right on down through the management team. And there's a great deal of accountability there. And so that permeates the program. What I mentioned before as well, the second piece would be a very values-driven safety culture. And so, through COVID, we reflected on that. We continue to reflect on that in terms of what are our core values and how do we take care of our folks each and every day. And so those two I mentioned, but those are absolutely critical. And then when you partner that with number 3, which is colleague engagement, every Smiths employee knows that he or she is responsible for the safety of themselves and those working around them. And we've driven that through all levels of engagement and empowerment. And whether that's our cardinal behaviors that say you can stop work if it doesn't feel safe, and we empower people to make those decisions, but that's a critical piece. As I mentioned with the ISO and the OSAS, I think we have a strong foundation, and I think to have a really good safety culture, you have to have the building blocks. That's a compliance foundation, strong policies and procedures that establish the framework, and those HSE management systems that lay out the framework, right? So that you have to have that. If the house isn't built on that foundation, then I don't think it's going to be as steady and strong. Couple that with, it's really important to have a seat at the table. And what I mean by that is, I regularly brief our board. I regularly brief our executive team. Next week and the week after, I brief them both. And it's important to have that seat so that the message can be shared and dialogue can occur, and you can test and sense the level of commitment there. So my boss and I both feel very good about how we're positioned, but I think if you don't have that seat at that head table, it makes it really tough to gauge commitment, makes it tough to gauge the level of importance, and so that's a critical piece. The sixth one I think is really, really important, and this goes for anything we do, and that is partnership and stakeholder work, and cultivating those relationships with key partners, key stakeholders, and identifying where they are in the business or the organization, and really building those out of genuine care, concern, and compassion, and building those relationships so that as you partner and move through a safety environmental culture, it's built off of trust, openness, transparency, and a good amount of accountability, such that if things start going not the right way, you can call somebody up and say, hey, I'm confused by this. I thought we agreed, and so on and so forth. So it's just a critical piece. Maybe to have mentioned earlier in the foundational stuff, but number 7 is data-driven decision-making, right? Is to have a really strong set of metrics and performance criteria. And so at Smiths, we have a very robust HSE data management system, and it gives us great credibility that we can turn to the data and not conjecture, speculation, anecdotes, but have long-term data trends to look at and to build decisions off of. Number 8 is about messaging, communications, and having a strong, consistent message that's reinforced. If you think about employee engagement and keeping folks aligned to those values, it's telling the story again and again, and having a story that resonates with people and embraces their needs and values, so that you have that level of trust and commitment all through the organization. Number 9, I would say, from my perspective, is my job frequently and foremost is selling and marketing safety and environment. Even if we have this strong culture, I need to continue to reinforce, continue to sell the purpose, the values, the benefit that's brought from great safety and environmental performance. And then number 10, I told you this one at the beginning, a humble approach to safety, right? So I would tell you that these 9, again, aren't magical, but I think they're very critical to our success, and that likely would translate to many organizations, but at the same time, very humble to know that there's better ways to do things, and that we're always trying to learn and never trying to act like we have all the answers, but continuing to be curious about new ways of doing things and new ways of approaching things. So those are the 10 I would identify, Melissa. I think they're really critical to how we do stuff, and as in other businesses I've worked, they've been very critical there as well.
Yes, that was great, and I think humility can take us a long way in a lot of places in life, to always remember to take a step back and realize that as much as numbers can tell us a lot and you can bring everyone to the table, but it's all about being willing to learn and grow together when the need arises. So thank you for taking us through that. And so these 10 steps, keys to success, looking at the numbers for Smith Group, it does appear that there's some impact there. I know in 2019, you had a low recordable injury rate of 0.41 injuries per 100 people. And moreover, in 2020, your recordable injury rate dropped to 0.30, representing a year-over-year improvement of almost 25%, which just from a numbers perspective, it's pretty great. So of those factors, are there any that you would kind of call out that were most instrumental in achieving those results? And outside of that, then if you could just share some information about other results that you've seen due to this commitment to safety, whether that's a better work environment, increased productivity. So yeah, just looking to get your idea on the outcomes and the impact.
Well, I think there's a lot there, and I guess we're very proud of that performance. We're proud of that improvement. We've been steadily under 0.5 for several years now, and so we see it as a journey towards zero harm, and we are rather zealous about saying that and stating that and continuing on the journey. I would also, in that humility, say I think we got some good fortune this year. We didn't have any serious injuries, but you all know how that works, right? The difference between a first aid and a recordable incident is often a matter of millimeters, and so there is maybe some good fortune that goes into the 25% improvement, and I have to just state that in candor. COVID and the pandemic, I believe, actually helped us, as bizarre as that might sound. I think our colleagues came to work, as our plants were all considered essential around the world, very focused. We were talking safety every day, even more than in prior times, because of the special procedures put in place and the need to work with good awareness and paying close attention to everything going on around us. I think that heightened focus and awareness actually helped drive safety improvement this year. I think our messaging all through the pandemic was related to safety and secure facilities and doing the right thing and looking out for one another. And so I think that all carried over positively. In addition to that, though, the things I just mentioned before, those all bear fruit, right? All those things over time continue to make good progress and headway into that performance. And I think we've seen that. We're going to report earnings in a few weeks, and we're very hopeful, as the fiscal year came to an end, that Smiths will have, to your question about productivity, a strong year in spite of all of the difficulties that business has been facing globally. So I think our employees being engaged, working hard for our customers, working hard to provide, the various products we produce that are in high demand in times like this, right? Our customers needed us, and we worked really hard to be there for them. And I think that, by working safely, folks could be at their workbench or at their work location doing what was needed to provide for those customers. So I think we saw it not only in safety performance, but really by the team globally coming together to work really hard for those customers in a really difficult time.
Yes, and I think it has been interesting. I know I've had some conversations with safety professionals and listened to them talk about the fact that their injury rates are actually lower now than they would have projected. And just, I think safety was called upon in a way that they took the spotlight. And it's, there is this kind of culture shift whenever I speak with people that, oh my goodness, there's so much going on just related to current responses, but also just, it's finally like, oh, the safety professionals have to, we need them. And you kept mentioning, globally, and I mean, developing a safety culture even in one site can be challenging, obviously, but Smiths Group, you managed to do this across the globe. So I want to hear about some particular challenges that you face when managing safety and communication across multinational teams, how you might handle different customs or language barriers, and what some effective keys are involved in creating a safety culture across nations, an international safety program?
Well, it's a very good question, and it's just what we do. So it's good to kind of stop and reflect on that. First and foremost, right? So we have these 5 divisions inside Smith's Group, and they all are led by exceptionally talented HSE leaders, and I work with them on a daily basis, and there's a great collaborative approach that we take, and the 6 of us work together. If you were to talk to any of them, they would say we collaborate exceptionally well, as good as any group in the business. And so that really helps. And I think the steady leadership and the relationships among their leaders helps drive that consistency. Each of those businesses, Melissa, is different, right? They have different corporate structures. They have different customers. They have different markets they serve. They have different footprints. And so the challenge is, and I think this served us well during COVID, is in the guidance we develop at the corporate level, at my level, at the group level for Smith's Group, is to set the boundaries and say, here's where we operate, and anything within there is in your flexibility. And I think we've been pretty good at trying to do it. We just had a call this morning, and we're trying to resolve some issues of, do we need to be perfectly aligned, closely aligned, or barely aligned, and we work through that based on the risk and the issue in front of us. And I think we do that fairly well. And I think that's one of the keys for trying to drive a global program, is being sensitive to, different cultures, different geographies, different business needs. And I think we've done that fairly effectively.
Wonderful. And so when it comes to, do you guys just have regular meetings when it comes to developing that internal alignment or varying degrees of it and the collaboration? Was that something that you all have worked and found particular ways that helps increase that alignment and collaboration?
Well, yeah, I think like all good working relationships, Melissa, I think there's the secret sauce is trust and transparency.
Yes.
And there's been good stability in those relations over my 3 years in the role. And so we know each other well. We know what each other has to deal with and work to manage inside our businesses. And so there's really good candor and good mutual respect. And I think that and frankly, very frequent communication. And so
Okay.
I think it works quite well for us. I can see where in other businesses that can be a challenge, but for us, given the history we have and the alignment of senior leaders along with the collaboration among those folks, it really works quite well.
Well, that is excellent. Sounds like a good, healthy working relationship, which can be easier said than done. And so
Well,
you
and if I
mentioned,
could, just to add to that, Melissa, on that point, right? So it's not that we always agree, right? But
yeah,
it's because of all those hours of collaboration where we've worked and solved problems together, that when we don't agree, we're able to kind of muscle through those tougher times and find common ground, common solutions, because we've been we've done this enough and been through things to know we've been through it before. We can do it again, and that really helps.
that would help. That sounds great. And you mentioned that you joined Smith's Group 3 years ago. And I know prior to this, you spent about 15 or so years in the airline industry. So, what lessons did you learn from your experience in that industry? How did it translate into work that you do at Smith's, or how might it have differed?
Well, it's a good question again, Melissa. I what it really helps me with is I refer back to those days regularly. Um, we used to talk about blue sky days in the airline, and when the weather was nice and the operation was running smoothly, everything went well. And it's when it started to snow or rain or we had unplanned events that's when risk just got magnified. And in a manufacturing environment, generally we have far more control at Smiths, but I still harken back to those days, because when we have unplanned events, when things get out of normal sync in our business, we often have increased risk or dynamic risk, and so we go back to that all the time. The other thing that I reflect on all the time is, at Northwest Airlines, we had several unions that I worked with, and lots of people have different views on that. I found working with the union leadership on safety was such a great place for common ground, and we were able to really collaborate well, as I talked about in earlier discussion about the importance of collaboration and finding common purpose. And so I reflect back on the employee engagement stuff we drove at the airline and the importance of that with and through in collaboration with our unions. And that was a really helpful experience because I think we were able to make great progress at the airlines. And so we've always tried to build off that at Smiths.
Wonderful. And you mentioned, planning for the unexpected. I would say the last 6 months was not something anyone saw coming. And as we've heard you speak about, even under normal circumstances, communication is foundational to safety. And I got a chance to see, a little bit in an article about Smith's Group response to the ongoing evolving situation, the role of communication and data sharing. So I wanted to ask you, and for our viewers out there, I'm going to pull up a DORN framework just that we've developed as far as response preparedness and getting people back to work safely. But I'd like to hear what you all have done at Smiths, as well as get advice that you might have for organizations that might be, struggling a little bit or might not have the same resources like a Smiths or an Amazon or other people do. So I'll pull up the framework and then, want to hear what the times have taught us and what you all have done at Smiths.
Yeah, well, it's interesting, Melissa. The corporate HSE team and global security team at Smiths Group is 3 FTEs. So that's a bit surprising for lots of folks, right? We tend to put the responsibility in the organization, and so our HSE folks tend to be in the divisions, but even there we rely on frontline leaders and supervisors to execute and deliver on our safety and environmental obligations. So we're a pretty lean, we're not like some of those others, and so that would be the first thing. The second thing is what we have here from the DORN tool. We have followed this, not necessarily to a T, but these are all the critical parameters we worked on, right? So I actually headed up Smith's Crisis Core team, and we worked, I think, rather effectively to help Smiths, survive, endure, manage through the pandemic to date, and we looked at all of these things in great length and detail. And what we did is we established various work streams that covered each of these items. And then those work streams reported in to the core team, the crisis management team. And we found that along with each division had a similar team, like the core team. And so the coordination, collaboration among them, I think really helped Smiths navigate its way through and even through till today. These 5 pieces couldn't agree with more. I think the piece that I would maybe add is we relied heavily on our government affairs and legal teams to help navigate country nuances, country requirements, and how do we navigate through those, and how do you balance employee privacy issues with safety issues in terms of screenings on the way into the plant, and making sure we did that all in a compliant way that protected our employees while protecting the workforce. So these were very key components for us as well.
Yes, I found that across places that there's been some themes that have come across and as you saw in our framework, we include the importance of injury prevention. Obviously, we're an injury prevention based company. So I know I've had some conversations with safety professionals over the last few months where I've got them on the phone and they're telling me, Melissa, it's great to hear from you, but I'm sitting here mixing my own disinfectant right now, or I'm trying to acquire PPE. So how do you balance responding to something like a global pandemic with more, I guess, traditional safety matters like injury prevention?
Well, it's it's a challenge. I think it's, because you can find yourself in crisis management. And if I harken back to my airline example, right, that is an unplanned event of massive proportions. And so how do you keep some attention on the basics? And frankly, in some cases, that stuff slips for a little bit. I think, we were just very conscious of needing to keep the fundamentals in play, because we knew, like I said, to begin with, the foundation is the one of the keys to success. And if you let the foundation start to crumble, everything built above it is going to struggle. So I think as an HSE work stream, as we called it during the COVID pandemic, and that's the group that just met earlier today, we reflect back on those basics and make sure that the house is still strong, if you would, in terms of the foundation. And so for us, it was very deliberate, right, to say we need to get back, make sure our core compliance pieces are in place. We never stopped collecting our data on our emissions, on our safety performance. All that stuff stayed steady throughout the entire process. So we didn't allow folks to pass on that, which I think kept some of that natural rhythm of monthly reporting, daily reporting, incident injury reporting at a high level.
Okay, and related to that, I'm just curious to your response. I see that you're working from home. I imagine other people are. Have you had anything new arise with how you're dealing with the safety and well-being of workers who are remote right now?
We've spent yes. I think the challenge is helping those folks in that adjustment. Working from home for many folks was new and different, and you put the stress of a pandemic, you put some of the economic strain on, you put all of a sudden children in the mix. My dog has never been happier to see me as much. Right, so it just is this new dynamic, and there's different stresses and strains. There's stresses and strains about going to the office as well, right? There's stresses in commuting, there's stresses in interpersonal relationships. So it's just different, right? And it's a different environment. I think a lot of it was about the unknown of how long will this last? Will this last forever? Will this last a short time? How do I plan? And I think that led to, for a lot of our folks, just some additional stresses, and we had to be very cognizant of that and work with them, closely partnered with our HR colleagues to make sure that from a health and wellness end, we were being responsive to that, giving folks mechanisms to talk, share, raise concerns. And so we established some new reporting mechanisms. We established some new communication tools just to keep people better connected in that new way of working.
Thank you. That's sorry I sprung that on you, but it just, as I heard you talk, I'm like, I wonder how you all have adapted. I would definitely say adaptation and innovation are the times. And while still uncertain, I think we're all certain that the world will be different as we move forward just a little bit. So Tim, thank you so much for your time and valuable insight. I really appreciate you taking time to be here with me today and for doing this with us. And I appreciate everyone out there who took time to listen or view this episode, and hope you all tune in for the next one. Thanks again, Tim.
Yep, thank you.